Chico says, so if Bitcoin hits 1 million, what does an exit strategy look like to buy a house? Asking for a friend. I'd say this as well. This would be my answer to you. Chico, don't sell. I've actually been talking to, I've talked to a couple people in the last week or two who were buying Bitcoin with the end goal of buying a house. And you know what? I have nothing against that, obviously. I think that everybody should have a house. Everybody deserves to have a house. But the one thing you got to make sure is make sure you're going to be there for a while. If you do end up selling some of your Bitcoin for a down payment, make sure you're going to be there for a while, because buying a house, there's a lot that goes into it, especially here in Canada with property taxes and transfer taxes and lawyer fees and realtor fees and everything that goes along with it. So make sure that you're in a spot that you want to be if you decide to go that route. But the other thing I would say is if you are somebody like Chico who's looking to buy a house, the one thing I would say is make the minimum down payment. The minimum. I think depending on what country you're in, I think in Canada here it's 5% down payment minimum. And most people go with 20 because they're like, oh, I'll have to pay less interest. I'll have to pay less insurance fees on it, which is true. That was a very good idea, I think, 10 years ago. But now that Bitcoin exists, I would put in the absolute bare minimum for your down payment. And the reason I say that is because if you think about, if you actually do a spreadsheet, I highly encourage Chico and anybody else who's looking at a house, if they're selling some of their Bitcoin, look at the difference. Let's say that a house costs $1 million, which is not far out of the realm here, especially in Canada. So you get $1 million house, you could do a 10% down payment, which would be $100,000. So you sell some of your Bitcoin, that's the minimum. Or let's say the minimum here in Canada is 5%. So you could do $50,000. And so if you look at the difference there between the minimum versus a 10% down payment, that's $50,000. And instead of selling that Bitcoin, consider what that $50,000 is going to do for the next 10 years or 20 years while your mortgage is around. And again, I really think that there's going to be more people who are refinancing their house to buy Bitcoin, which is essentially going back to the minimum down payment there. So that would be my recommendation. I'm not going to tell you not to buy a house. I think everybody should have a house, and that's, the goal for most people. But just make sure that you are going to be there for a very long time and do the minimum down payment, because 60% or whatever it is, 50% annual return on Bitcoin far exceeds the 5 or 6% interest rate that you're going to have to pay on that mortgage. And if you need to, you can always just sell some of your Bitcoin. If the lower down payment means a higher monthly payment, and if you get behind a little bit, you can just sell some of your Bitcoin. But it doesn't really make sense to sell your Bitcoin early just to save some amount or some points on your interest rate, in my opinion. Oh, my back's sore. Why? And this is another thing too. You could just wait it out. Oh, that's the other thing too. Sorry. One last thing on this question. If I was in the US and I was looking at buying a house or something with Bitcoin, having to sell Bitcoin, I would wait a while, because there's a pretty good chance here, I would say in the next couple of years, that the capital gains on Bitcoin are going to be gonzo. So don't rush it. I'm sure you could always, I don't know, actually. I'm thinking you might be able to refile and get rid of it, but I wouldn't go through that. I would just wait it out, see what happens. Give it a year and see what happens with the capital gains, because I think that they're going to be going away on Bitcoin. So there's no sense paying any money to the government that you don't really need to. And this is even a better idea here. Get a mortgage without selling the Bitcoin.